The death of Alistair Wilson is one of modern Scotland's greatest mysteries. A man murdered on the doorstep of his family home, a mysterious stranger, a blue envelope, and a potential local dispute. There are an incredibly long list of theories that we'll look at. Some credible and some are absolutely ridiculous. The biggest question of all is, how did Alistair find himself in a situation where he was allowed to walk away from the man who intended to harm him, only to return to the door without knowing that would be his final decision? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is William and this is the Baker Street Bureau. If tall tales of true crime and the outright unexplainable are your thing, you're in the right place. If you enjoy the video and want to support the channel, the best way to do that is by pressing the hype button on your mobile phone as many times as possible. It's a new feature that lets you support small creators for free on videos that have been out for less than a week. You get 3 of them, so if you want to grace me with one, that would be absolutely amazing. Also, on a slight side note, I do have the flu. Somehow I've managed to catch a cold in the middle of a heat wave, which has made sleeping this past week impossible. I wouldn't recommend it. Now, without further gilding the lily, this is the story of Alistair Wilson, the most regular person who was killed in the most irregular way possible. It was a Sunday evening just like any other at the Wilson family home. Alistair was at home with his wife Veronica and their 2 young sons, Andrew, who was 4, and Graham, who was 2. Within the same property, Veronica's father lived in an annexed flat. Nothing unusual happened during that day that would indicate anything sinister following up in the evening. Andrew had been out to visit his father during the day, and in the evening, the children had their bath and were going through their bedtime routine. Alistair was upstairs, tucked up with the boys, and reading them some bedtime stories. At around 7 p.m, the doorbell rang. Veronica went downstairs to open the door as Alistair was engrossed in fairy tales. An unfamiliar man presented himself at the door. He was described to be wearing a baseball cap and a jacket. The man wasn't asking for directions or there for anything specific. Veronica didn't recognize him at all, even after he made himself known. An early account from the police investigation said that the only words Veronica remembered him saying were Alistair Wilson. Veronica, as expected, fetched Alistair from upstairs and pulled him away from the story time. At the door, the mysterious stranger and Alistair exchanged words for a few minutes. During the conversation, the stranger handed Alistair a simple blue envelope with nothing inside and the name Paul written on its front. Alistair, bemused, walked back inside the house and presented the envelope to Veronica. The particulars of that conversation between Alistair and Veronica have been withheld from the public eye, but the key takeaway here is at that exact moment, he was safely back inside the house. He was away from the unknown harm of the stranger, although he felt comfortable that the man wasn't a threat and had left the front door open. Whatever happened during that first conversation with the stranger and the conversation with Veronica upstairs hadn't caused Alistair enough concern to shut the door or call the police. Alistair walked downstairs, envelope in hand. The fire door at the top of the stairs closed shut behind him, and he approached the stranger who was patiently waiting outside the open front door. We don't know what Alistair said to him, and we don't know what he said in return, but Veronica heard 3 loud bangs she later described as the sound of wooden crates falling. Confused, Veronica investigated the noise, and Alistair's 4-year-old son, bustling with curiosity, followed closely behind. In the doorway, covered in blood, Alistair lay after being shot 3 times. His young son said many years later that seeing him there is his only surviving memory of him. Veronica immediately contacted emergency services while shouting for her father to come and get the children away from the situation. Despite the best efforts of paramedics and the staff at the Raigmore Hospital in Inverness, Alistair Wilson died later that evening. In order for us to understand the police response and initial theories, it's important to get a grasp of who Alistair Wilson was. Alistair was 30 years old and grew up in North Ayrshire. After schooling, he attended the University of Stirling to study accountancy and business law. After graduating, he joined the Bank of Scotland in 1996. His career progressed quickly, and he would end up working at the bank's headquarters in Edinburgh, where his work included private finance projects and specialist lending. By 2004, Alistair was working in business banking, and his team was established to target small and medium-sized businesses across a very large area of Scotland. He is often referred to in reports as a bank manager. I feel that this is an understatement. He was regarded very highly, not only by his colleagues at the bank, but also among the local business circles. Those reports paint him as a chap in a suit sat behind a desk cracking away at his computer. But his work involved him dealing closely and professionally with a lot of new and existing business and commercial clients. In the time running up to his death, Alistair was planning a very large change. He was preparing to leave his job at the Bank of Scotland and was looking forward to joining a new job with the Building Research Establishment, a consultancy that was expanding its work across northern Scotland. Outside of work, Alistair was described as what I can only summarise as strikingly ordinary. He was a husband and father who enjoyed time with his family. He would make an effort to be home for dinner time with the family and religiously read stories to the boys before bed. So, why would anyone want to hurt him? Police went through Alistair's entire life, front to back, left to right, looking for the thing that made the murder make sense. A seedy relationship, a dodgy business deal, someone that he crossed, or maybe some hidden financial crimes. A year after he was killed, detectives stated that all routes of discovering a motive had run dry. The complete lack of motive produced an absurd amount of murder theories over the next 2 decades. Some of them were genuine lines of police inquiry, and others were posted online by the same people who think I'm an AI of myself. One of those earliest theories from the police was whether Alistair was in fact the intended target. Now, on the surface, that one's very appealing. Alistair had no obvious enemies, and the murder was so extreme compared to anything that they found in his background search. That made the simplest explanation that it wasn't meant to be him very easy. There was another man in the Nairn area called Alistair Wilson, which helped keep the theory alive. But there's a hole. The mysterious gunman went to the house, asked directly for Alistair, and they spoke for several minutes. Now, we don't know what information the killer had been given or what was said during that conversation, but it does mean that this would have had to have been a very elaborate mistake. The killer had the correct address and name, with enough interaction with him to have discovered that something was wrong. So, had Alistair angered someone through his work at the bank? After all, he was incredibly influential in the rise and fall of local business. It was one of the most major angles for early investigations. Maybe someone was refused finance and their business was in trouble. That could have led to their business shutting down and them losing all of their life savings. Hopes and dreams just evaporated. I've seen many a man fall to the hook at the bottom of a bottle for less, so it's not a far-fetched thing to think. This theory was worked on for years, all the way up until 2022, the major investigation team publicly stated that although they couldn't rule out every single scenario and every single deal, they believed that the answer lies within Alistair's personal life. This ties us quite neatly to theories around organised crime, money laundering, and paramilitary involvement. That last bit sounds a bit extreme, but bear with me and I'll make some sense of it. One persistent story came from an anonymous caller to a local radio who claimed to know who arranged the murder and suggested it was related to a large financial transaction involving major players in the criminal underworld. Later stories slowly shifted that away from big scary criminals to paramilitary groups. Very similar to the previous theory, this one had no substantial evidence to support it. Detective Superintendent Graham Mackey later addressed the stories directly. The sensationalized theory that someone arranged to have Alistair killed are also quite hard to back up. Was Alistair assassinated by a hitman? No. I'm just going to say no. Yes, a man approached the house, and yes, the man was armed. But he stood in front of Veronica and had a lengthy conversation with Alistair twice. He waited patiently outside the house. There's a chance that the man was hired, but he certainly doesn't appear to be a professional. There's also no evidence of note around payments, contracts, or anyone commissioning a killing. So that means that there's nothing anywhere to imply why Alistair might have been killed. Right? This is the point in the video where things are going to get a bit weird. For nearly 18 years, theories ranged from banking disputes to organized crime, mistaken identities, and less than professional hitmen. In 2022, Police Scotland publicly highlighted something that happened almost literally on Alistair's doorstep. The Havelock Hotel, situated directly opposite the Wilson family home on Crescent Road. During the summer of 2004, a large wooden decking area had been built in the hotel's car park. Alistair was not happy about it. The work was then subjected to a retrospective planning application. According to Police Scotland, he believed the decking was leading to increased noise and litter in the area, and he formally objected to the planning application. Now, this information isn't remarkable. People object to planning applications all the time. Thanks, Sue, for not letting me build my shed. It's the timing that transformed this from a regular residential occurrence into a seriously considered theory. Alistair logged his formal objection on Thursday, the 25th of November 2004. The objection was then sent to the Havelock Hotel. Investigators believe it was being openly discussed inside the hotel bar over the next few days. They stated that this appears to have been the first point in which Alistair's opposition had been widely known. And then, on the same weekend, on the evening of the 28th, Alistair was murdered. Now, let me break that down a little bit. Thursday, Alistair formally objects. Friday, according to police, people in the Havelock begin discussing the objection. Saturday, the issue continues to gain traction locally. And on Sunday, a man walks across or into Crescent Road, asks for Alistair Wilson directly, and then shoots him on his doorstep. Assuming we're all familiar with the works of Sir Isaac Newton, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. But this doesn't directly prove anything. It is, however, the first major motive where there's police documented evidence that immediately precedes a murder. Police Scotland took it very seriously. Detectives travelled all the way to Canada to interview a witness they deemed important to help them understand the planning issue. After the theory was made public in 2022, two further witnesses came forward with information concerning the planning application and the construction of the decking. The police specifically appealed for people who had been in the Havelock that weekend. Anyone who had heard the planning objection being discussed, those involved in the construction of the decking. This very quickly escalated to the police's principal line of inquiry. Everything I'm about to say comes with a heavy amount of allegedly attached to it, as none of this has been officially confirmed by Police Scotland. In 2022, the Press and Journal reported, ahead of a Channel 5 documentary, that people in the Havelock may have heard a threat against Alistair's life before the murder. Now, that is obviously an enormous claim. If this transpired to be true, a threat to his life days before it was taken is absolutely wild. Now, I can't find anywhere that Police Scotland have confirmed this to be true. The police statements confirm the argument over the decking, the timing, and that the objection was being discussed in the hotel. They don't publicly confirm that a specific person made any threats. Now, there are a lot of theories, and we'd be here all day if I went through all of them. So before anyone gets uppity about me missing some of them out, I'm fully aware there's a bunch. The decking theory, whilst it feels bizarre to say out loud, it has the best factual foundation of any publicly known motive. What it doesn't explain is why something so mundane would escalate to murder. There is, however, one thing that I haven't spoken about yet. Paul. The blue envelope is real, and the name written on the front of it is real, which means it's completely shrouded in mystery. There are a bunch of individual theories surrounding the envelope. Paul was someone Alistair knew. It was someone the killer wanted to discuss. The envelope was an excuse to begin a conversation. It was designed to confuse and misdirect Alistair. It had some strange symbolic meaning, or it might have been the name of the person who arranged the murder. One of the theories that caught some wind online, again with no evidence to support it, is that the envelope was supposed to be some sort of Mexican Death Note equivalent. The biggest challenge with tying everything together is working out where the envelope, the name Paul, and the Havelock all cross paths. There are zero public statements that give even a shred of light on where all of it lines up. The final theory that I wanted to look at was a bit of a classic cover-up angle. There were online claims that the murder has remained unsolved for this long because Police Scotland are covering for someone powerful. The killer may have had police connections, which explains some of the oddities around the investigation. These claims have been pushed by the Wilson family, being highly critical of how Police Scotland handled certain parts of the investigation. There are documented problems with the later police investigation, which I'll talk about shortly, but there's also no evidence that the police have protected Alistair's killer. So, where do all these theories leave us? The square root of absolutely nowhere. None of it makes sense, and that's one of the things that have made Alistair's story so deep. All we know is that investigators spent decades trying to find theories that fit. And that's exactly where Police Scotland had so much pressure piled on them from the start. A man was murdered at close range, an eyewitness had seen the killer, and eventually they recovered the murder weapon. But somehow, none of those things gave them the identity of the killer. The police began following the usual channels of inquiry. They interviewed Veronica, knocked on local doors, spoke to several witnesses that reported seeing a man who might have been connected. CCTV from around the area was examined, but the footage was reported to be fruitless. Early appeals described the mystery gunman as a white male around 5'8" and apparently in his mid-30s. A huge challenge they faced early on was the conversation about the blue envelope, a key piece of evidence that had mysteriously vanished. The police searched the house and nearby area, but they came to the conclusion that the killer took it back after shooting Alistair. Care was taken to remove this critical clue away from the scene, and yet, 10 days later, the murder weapon just appeared, carelessly discarded in a drain. A street sweeper, whose job for the day was cleaning various bits of debris, discovered a quite small handgun inside one of the drains only a few streets away from the scene. Ballistic testing quickly established that this was the handgun used to murder Alistair Wilson. Now, the firearm itself is fascinating. It was a .25 caliber Hainel pistol, manufactured in Germany sometime between 1922 and 1930. The obvious question was, where did the gun come from? And the obvious answer is that it must have entered Britain as a wartime souvenir. The weapon became subject to extensive forensic examination. Police traveled to Germany and the Czech Republic. They interviewed firearms specialists and did their best to track down the ammunition used. Samples were taken from inside of the weapon's internal mechanisms and sent to 12 different labs, but they produced very limited results. And this is where some of that earlier criticism I spoke about began. The weapon wasn't found during the initial police search, but was, as I said, found 10 days later by a chap that worked for the council cleaning drains. Now, that doesn't mean that the original search was negligent and we don't know how accessible that drain was, but it does mean that incredibly valuable forensic evidence had spent 10 days exposed to the elements before anybody recovered it. On top of the weapon giving no definitive information, police took more than 3,500 statements and spoke to more than 14,000 people, and still nothing came of it. The main set of developments came many years later. In March of 2022, after revisiting witness statements, the description of the killer changed. Detectives expanded the range of his age, which naturally caused some confusion when you consider the next development in the case. With that new information, a witness approached Police Scotland with information about something that they'd seen about 4 weeks before Alistair was killed. A witness described seeing two men on East Beach in Nairn. One of them was believed to be in his 20s, which is now relevant because the police expanded the age range. And according to the witness, that younger man was carrying a handgun. Whilst police took this very seriously, nothing was proven to be true. Then, the following year, another possibility emerged of similar fashion. The Times reported that detectives were looking at the possibility 2 men were involved in the killing itself. According to that report, the person who approached Alistair's house wasn't the same person who fired the gun. The theory is based off the angle that in order to draw Alistair outside, the shooter wouldn't want to be recognized, so they used someone from out of town to knock and speak. It would explain some of the oddities around the timeline, but again, like everything else, there's absolutely nothing to prove this is true. The Wilson family went on to lodge their complaints that the investigation had been mishandled. From the evidence sitting in the rain to an arrest that was supposed to take place, but for some mysterious reason, it was halted, they weren't happy. Police Scotland's own professionalism and assurance investigation upheld 3 of the complaints. And after lots of internal investigation, there was acknowledgement of all 3 failings, and the police apologised. Up until 2024, the Wilson family actively cooperated with the police. Veronica and Andrew Wilson had publicly said that their relationship with the police had become damaged beyond repair. They accused senior leadership of poor judgment and a lack of accountability. They said they were no longer confident that the police could solve the case. Eventually, someone outside the police intervened. The case had been investigated and reviewed repeatedly for almost 20 years. The police had the murder weapon, descriptions of the killer, thousands of witness statements, a possible motive, a potentially important beach sighting, a possible 2-person theory, advances in forensic technology, and at one point an individual they had apparently intended to arrest. Scotland's Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain decided that the case should be looked at with a fresh team, fresh resources, and from the ground up. Operation Sabine was born. 14 officers were assigned to the case, with further resources said to be on hand. These officers were supposedly drawn from many different areas of the force, allowing a wide array of skills to be utilised. They started with 10,000 documents, around 6,000 witness statements, and nearly 14,000 investigative actions. Whether all this and the advancements in forensic testing will harbour any meaningful results, we don't know yet. They're still working through everything and looking to unearth answers. Answers that lie in the strangest of places. They might be somewhere within those 2 conversations between Alistair and the mysterious stranger at the door. The answers as to what the blue envelope meant and who Paul is. And the question that I can't get out of my mind. How did Alistair Wilson find himself in a situation where he was allowed to walk away from the man who intended him harm, only to return to the door without knowing that that would be his final decision. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is William, and this is the Baker Street Bureau of Tall Tales of True Crime and the Outright Unexplainable. Your thing, you're in the right place. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I want to thank you for being patient with me, as I apparently have half the lung capacity I normally do. So getting through this one was a bit of a struggle, but the show must go on, as they say. If you want to support my work, the best way you can do that is with the new system called Hypes. I learned about this very recently, and it's quite cool. If you go onto your mobile and click the like button, you should get a pop-up asking if you want to hype the video. As a viewer, you get 3 hypes a week, and you can use them on channels under 500,000 subscribers. They only work on videos that are less than 7 days old. This, I believe, is YouTube's attempt at trying to help smaller creators stand out amongst a sea of very dominant big people. If you take a look at my Luke Durbin video, you'll see that the views on that are mega. And that's because it had 280 hypes on it from all of you, which is absolutely crazy. That video was the 8th most hyped video in the United Kingdom that week. That is mental. Now, I'm not asking you to use all 3 hypes on me. Save some for some other awesome smaller creators you find, but I wouldn't be sad if you pressed it 3 times. It's something that you're going to hear me talking about quite a lot in the future, because it is finally leveling the playing field just a little bit between us smaller creators and the Goliaths that dominate the YouTube feed. We're also really close to 10,000 subscribers, which is mental. So for all of the support so far, again, thank you. Now, if you're new here and you've made it this far, I've got a bunch of other videos that you could go and watch. Either way, thank you for choosing to spend your precious time with me today. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.